In this video, we're going to go through our sermon notes feature. So the sermon notes would allow your congregation or your web listeners at a later time, they would come to your sermons page, they would click on sermon notes, and then they would be able to fill in information and take notes on the sermon as they're listening to it. So we've got a sample here, as you can see, and we'll go back and recreate this sample so you can see how to do it in just a second. So, you know, as your congregation and listeners are listening to the sermon, you know, they can be more interactive in listening to it. And this is just, like I said, a brief overview, a brief sample, interactive sermon notes. So that will, you know, increase listener attention and boost retention. Attention spans are pretty short. How short? When it comes to listening to sermons, average attention span is less than 10 minutes. Average sermon is about 45 minutes. Why do interactive sermon notes matter? Matter because you want to engage your listeners and have them listen to the message and not have them simply sit through the message. Research shows, and this is just a wrap up of it, research shows people who engage in note taking demonstrate higher levels of comprehension. Interactive sermon notes is designed to increase attention and engage your listeners while increasing retention of the sermon. And then they can take additional notes if there's additional scriptures or additional information that you want them to look up later. They have a spot here always for additional notes. And then what they would do is they would come down here and email the sermon notes to themselves so they would have a record of it. So that's what they would do, your listeners, your congregation would do on the website. So if we go back to our EZChurch website manager, sermon notes is part of the sermon, so this is part of the gold package. Right now, the $24.95 EZChurch gold. So what you would do is you would come down here and you have an edit sermon notes. And I've just got a sample sermon down here just so we can have something to use. And this is the sermon notes that I had previously. And since they would have taken the sermon notes on Sunday and then I would load the sermon after it's recorded, I can come down here and I can assign these sermon notes to that sermon. So if somebody at a later time is listening to a sermon, they can also go through and have the sermon notes with them as well. So we'll just start from scratch. So we're going to clear our sermon notes and that will start them all over. We have 3 items in the sermon notes here. We can do title, subtitle, sermon text, or fill in answer box. And we have a little description of them down here. Titles and subtitles, that's going to be like a generic or one line. And the big difference here is you can center or justify that text. Sermon text is going to be continuous, more like a paragraph. You'll probably put it in parts at a time, but you can do a paragraph and put some spacing between paragraphs. And the fill and answer box would be just where they would enter their answers. So I've got the sermon notes here saved, just so I don't have to retype them in. So the first thing would be a title or subtitle. And I can paste that in. And I can change the size. Right now it's an H1, a header 1. I can change the size to any of the sizes. We'll leave it at H1. I can bold. Like I said, you can justify the title or subtitle. So I'll center that. And I can choose a color. We'll make this red. And I'm going to add that to sermon notes. And you'll see that start to build up here. Next item is the date. This was from... so we're going to do another subtitle. We'll center that as well. We're going to make that a little smaller, make that an H3, and just for playing around, we'll make sure that we add some color to it. This is just another intro, and for the intro here I can go either title or title, subtitle, or sermon text. We'll put it in as title, subtitle. We'll make it much smaller, down to H5. Now I'm just putting colors in just so we can see the you may keep it all black, you may keep it one color, have the title. Like I said, I'm just using some colors. So this here starts our actual sermon notes part, and what I have here in red is where they're putting in. That's where the fill-in boxes would be. So this is going to be sermon text, and sermon text will come up just as a flow. So I'll put in an answer box, and I can control the size, and this is the amount of text they can put in. So then we'll just add it at 100. So they'll have fill-in box. Listener attention, and this is bold, and because this is bold, you'll have to put it in its own sermon text box. Paste that in, and we're going to bold that. And this section will go in its own sermon text box. Another fill-in, and I can make these fill-ins, like I said, I can make these larger. So that'll just make that fill-in text box larger. Now this next section could be another part of sermon text, or it could be a subtitle, title, subtitle. So I'm going to use the title, subtitle. Again, I'll center it, change the color, bold it, we'll italicize it, and we're going to add that. If I wanted to put a little spacing in between this sermon text and the title, what I would need to do is come up here to the last sermon text, and you see that each of them is highlighted, so I can click on them and come back and edit it. So I can come back and I can put a couple enters, and that'll just give me a little bit more spacing. So we'll see here how short is also bold, needs to go in its own sermon text box. Sermon text. We're going to make that a little bigger, and we'll make it bold. Take that space out, and you'll see I take the spaces out, and that just helps with the spacing. If you want more spacing in there, you can leave the extra spaces. Another sermon text box. We're going to add that. We have another fill-in. We'll add that. The word minutes is bold. It goes in its own sermon text. So we'll add that. More sermon text. Fill in answer box. Add that. And the word minutes. And again, we're in the sermon text here. So this is bold, so it needs to go in its own text box. But because of my spacing here, I will need to put enters either after this. Make that bold. I'll need some spacing here, so I'll put it in this box. You can also put it into the box, into the next box. I could copy and paste all of this. And you don't have to copy and paste. You could type this in as you go. I just have it copied and pasted just so you don't have to sit as I type information. We have I just put the fill-in box. So I can put all of this in one. I've got some bold there. So I can put this in one section. So let's copy that out and we'll put that in one sermon text box. And if I want additional spacing, I can use that, or I can take that spacing out. This is bold. It goes in its own separate sermon text. There was spacing there. We'll put it in this box. We'll add that. And as I said, you can see we've got our sermon notes is building as we build it. And that is an important point. While I think about that, this is live on the website. So if somebody were to hit the website this second, they would see the sermon notes as I'm building it. So you can disable the sermon notes and enable the sermon notes by clicking the green check mark. We'll change it to a red X to disable and enable. So you can disable it, build it, and then re-enable it, or you can leave it built and people would just see what you're working on. And this would be my last. There's only text here. It could be a title, subtitle. It could be just sermon notes as we have here. So that would be my new interactive sermon notes. In this case, it's the same as the previous one. Yours would be different. As I mentioned before, if I want to change anything, I can come up, I can click on that, and I can change that particular section and update. If I prefer, I also have a delete. I could delete that header. I can click on any. I can delete the text. I can update the text. If I want to change anything of that text, I can change it by clicking on it and making my update. So after I've recorded the sermon, come back, I upload the sermon, then I can assign this set of text to a sermon. See, I only have the sermon from the 10th. I don't have the one from the 17th. That would be what my new notes are. So if we go back, we look at our page, our sermon notes, web visitors come in. You see this is our sample sermon. This would be the previous one. This would be the one from the 10th. And then as you're doing the new sermon, the current sermon, the congregation, the listeners, they could fill in and listen along and fill in with you, add their notes, and add their email so it's sent. This is our webmail. So let me get logged in to our webmail, and we'll take a look at the email that was sent. So this is the email they would receive. So this is the interactive sermon notes. The fill-in boxes has their information underlined. It has the sermon notes that you have there. So 10 minutes was what they filled in. 45 minutes is what they filled in. You want to have them listen. They filled in listen. They filled in sit through. And then any notes that they would have taken themselves. Thank you for watching our video. For more information on our EZChurch web hosting service, including plans and pricings, or to start a 30-day free trial, our website is shepherdsland.com. You can reach us toll-free at 866-394-6789, or email us support@shepherdsland.com or sales@shepherdsland.com. Again, thank you for watching our video.